on section 3 is it deals with completing the square, is what it's dealing with. This is just one more technique in order to solve quadratics. The other day we did things like square rooting, we did things like factoring, or the zero product property, whatever you want to call it, and we also did graphing. Today I'm going to show you another way called completing the square. Okay, this one's a little bit more complicated, but I think you'll get it. The first problems, though, are going to look like this. It's going to say x squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 100, and it's going to say solve by using square roots still. The problem is, if you look at that example, I can't square it because, as you guys noticed earlier, it's got x squared and it's got x in it, right? It's not set up to square root it. However, can we make it set up that way? Not going to divide it. We're going to factor it. Okay? What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 64 but adds up to be negative 16? Negative 8 and negative 8. Do you see that I have the same group twice? Do you remember that page 91 that we did? It always seemed there was one part of it. It was always the same group twice. And I told you at that time you can either leave it split out or write it as one group squared. You want to write it as one group squared. This is the time when you write it as one group squared. Okay? Now, do you have a square root situation? Yes. So on the problems that say by using square roots, this is what they want you to do first. Then you need to factor, and you will get the same group twice. Now, how do I get rid of the square? You square root both sides. On the left side, what do you get? You get x minus 8. On the right side, what do you get? Plus or minus 10. Good job. Don't forget, it's plus or minus. Now, how do I solve for x? Add 8. All right, now, here's where I've seen this done a couple different ways, and most of it's wrong. A lot of times my college students do the same thing. They take 8 and then they say plus or minus 10. That's not telling me the answers at all. You need to split it up. It's 10 plus 8 and negative 10 plus 8. What's 10 plus 8? 18. And negative 10 plus 8? Negative 2. Those are your two answers, 18 and negative 2. Most people do this also. Before they split it up and they say 18 and then they say it's plus or minus 18. That's not true either. If I put negative 18 back in the original x, that's not going to equal 100 on the left side. What I'm saying by getting 18 and negative 2, if you want to check this, you can put 18 in for x. 18 squared minus 16 times 18 plus 64, and you should get 100. If you put negative 2 in there, negative 2 squared minus 16 times negative 2 plus 64 should be 100. If it's not, you screwed up. So if you would have put negative 18 in there, you would never get 100, because negative 18 squared, negative 16 times negative 18 would be a positive. There's no way that's going to ever equal 100. So that's one thing that you can do if you want to. You can check these, but you don't have to. I'll give you another one.
Do you have to just write something?
Huh? Now, hold on. Amanda said, are you going to have two answers for every problem? And I said, But what I really meant by that was you could have up to that many answers. Because if you get the same number twice, you don't have to write it twice. You can just write it once. So if I got, like remember when we had 4, like if we had x minus 4 and x minus 4, and we saw it and we factored it, and the answer was just 4, you just have to write it once instead of twice. But what could happen on this is you could get up to 2 answers every time. Why do I say 2? What's the highest exponent? What's the highest exponent in our problem? 2. So that's telling you right there how many answers you could have up to. All right? All right, do the same process that we had. Forget that the 36 is on the other side for a second. What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 4 but adds up to b4? Now, if you get comfortable enough with this, especially on these ones that say solve by square rooting, can you not do this step and just go right to x plus 2 squared?
Yeah.
Some of you will be able to, some of you will not be able to. And that's okay. If you have to do the extra step, please do that. Some of you are comfortable enough where you can go right to the squared part instead. Now what? When I square root it, what do I get?
Plus or negative 6.
And plus or minus 6. One thing that you'll notice with this section on the right-hand side, notice how I'm getting like nice numbers like plus or minus 6, plus or minus 10. You'll notice that for your problems too. They won't give you like plus or minus and then usually a square root. Not that they can, but they're not trying to get that for this type of problem. All right, now what? Okay, what is 6 minus 2? 4. What's negative 6 minus 2? And there's my two answers, 4 and negative 8. How are you guys so far with this part? All right, good. All right, now comes the fun ones. Before I give you a problem, I'm going to give you all the rules as far as how to use completing the square. That was still solving by square roots, and that's part of completing the square. But completing the square has rules. If you don't follow the rules, it's going to be wrong. Okay, so when you complete the square, the first step that you want to do with all these quadratics, and by the way, this isn't a quadratic situation, is your a has to equal 1. What number is the a? Where is it in the problem, I'm asking? It's in front of the x squared. Okay? That's where it is. It's the number in front of the x squared. We had that last chapter. A has to be 1. If it's not A1, then it's no good. Then what you do is you divide everything by that number. Okay? So A has to be 1. If it's not, make it. That's the first thing that should happen. I think most of the ones that you're going to see today are going to have it where A is 1. Maybe there might be a couple at the end where it's not. Okay? So the first thing you got to do is make sure that A equals 1. The second thing that you're going to do is you're going to move the constant, which is the letter C, to the opposite side or other side. Okay? Which one is the constant? It's the one that does not have a variable attached to it. So if you don't have an x on it, or an m, or whatever letter you're using, then that number, add or subtract it to the other side. Move the constant to the other side. That's what you're going to do for this step. Is everybody okay with that so far? All right. Step 3. This is how it gets its name. This is the most important step you're going to do in completing the square. You're going to take the number that's in the B position, you're going to divide it by 2, and square it to both sides. Now, why do I say to both sides? Because it's an equation, and if you do something to one side, you must do it to the other. Where is the B located at? It's usually in the middle, or the second one. It's the one in front of the x. Okay? So A was in front of x squared, B was in front of x, and C does not have an x. All right? Is everybody okay with that? And you'll see when we go through one, you'll see how it works. Okay? Step 4, you're going to factor one side clean up the other. Now, what I mean by factor on the one side, you'll have one side that has x's. Now, just so that you guys know, after I do step 3, it's going to look exactly like the square root ones that we just did. Where we had this thing here and we could factor it. And then the other side, we're going to clean it up because you're going to have more than one number on the one side. Cleaning it up means just add or subtract those two numbers together. Okay? Then after we factored it, what did we do? We square rooted both sides. And the 6th step was we solve for x. Those are the 6 steps to using completing the square. Now, I'm going to go through them very methodically with these for a few until you get the hang of it. Okay? Again, this is just one option that you have. You already have a couple options in your arsenal. You already have graphing. You already have factoring. You already have square rooting. Now I'm giving you another one. And eventually, after when we get to section 4, I'm going to give you a 5th one. All of them can solve the same problem. It's just which one you want to choose. So, here's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like this. X squared minus 10x plus 7 equals 0. And it's going to say, solve by completing the square. So, first thing is first. I want you to look at the A. Is A 1? Yeah. So, no need to make it. It's already A1. That's great. Good steak sauce. All right. Now, second step. Move the constant. What number is the constant up in there?
7.
So how do I move it? Subtract 7 to both sides. Before you write anything, I want you to watch how I write this. X squared minus 10x equals negative 7. Notice I left a giant space in there. Why did I leave a giant space in that spot? Because here comes step 3. I needed somewhere for that to go. What number is in the B position?
Negative 10.
Negative 10. What's negative 10 divided by 2? What's negative 5 squared?
25.
Good. So 25 is going to go to both sides. So I'm going to add 25 here and add 25 there. Is everybody okay with that step there? That is the key. If you screw up that one, it's not going to work from here on out. That is probably the most important thing you can do right there. If you can handle that, you can handle them all. Promise. Now, here's what I mean by factor. We're going to factor on the left side. Isn't this exactly like what we just got done doing with the square rooted ones? What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 25 but adds it to be negative 10? Careful. Negative 10. No, negative 5. Okay. Look at the screen. Is there a negative 5 on the screen anywhere?
Yes.
Yeah. Where? Do you see this number right here? Guess what? That's the number every time that goes in this spot. Whatever number is in that spot before you square it is the number that goes in with the x when you factor it. Every time. So if it's a fraction, think about that. How easy that can be on your life. If you know that number, you can just put it in there right away and not have to worry about factoring. Remember the one that Chandler did a couple days ago that was 5/4 that added up to be 3. And he found it was 5 halves and 1 half. Okay? Then on the right side, what's negative 7 plus 25? Okay. Looking at what's left now, is that like the square root problems?
Yeah.
Tamara, you've had a question for a little bit.
Why did you add 25 to
Okay? If you insert something to one side of the equation, you have to do it to the other side of the equation. What you do to one side, you have to do the other. An equation is a balance. Like a balance scale. If I add something to this side, I got to add that same number over here so that it keeps it on the same line. Okay? So no matter what you do, if you add 25 to the left, then you have to add 25 to the right, and vice versa. So now, how do I finish this? Square root. Square root. What's the square root of x minus 5 squared? Awesome. Plus or minus. What's the square root of 18? 3 the square root of 2. Taylor, how'd you get that? Did you break it down? Okay. And plus, have you guys had the square root of 18 before? I think a couple times it showed up. So just, that's one thing you'll notice. They don't reinvent numbers. Those numbers are the same all the time usually. Okay, how do I solve for x? Add 5 on both sides. Now, when you have 5 added to plus or minus 3 root 2, can you add those together to make 8 root 2? No. The square root of 2 is like a variable. Unless that 5 that was coming over also had a root 2 on it, you can't combine those to make it like 8 root 2 or negative 2 root 2. What you do for that is you write it as 5 plus or minus 3 root 2. If it's got a square root left in the answer like that, then you just leave it as 3 root 2 plus or minus, and then you just add the 5 to the front of it. I'm done. This is my problem. So think about all the steps I went through. Did I make A1? Well, it was already 1, so I was good. Did I move the constant? Yes. Did I do the b over 2a thing?
Yeah.
Squared? Yeah. Did I factor? Yeah. Did I square root it? Yes. Did I solve for x? Yes. I did the steps all the way across the board. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, let's go through step 1. Is A1? No.
Divide everything by 3.
Tamara, what?
I stole Amanda question. But she was asking me if it's like 5 root 2.
Yeah, if that 5 would have had a root 2 with it, then we added it.
Yes. Yes. But, Amanda, it never will. The only way that you can combine them is like those first ones, where the square root goes away. That factored group will never have a square root in it. You'll never see that one. But to answer your question, yes. But you'll never see one like that. Okay? The only way that you could combine those, Amanda, is on the right-hand side. If when you square root that, it comes out perfectly where there's no square root left. Okay. Is A1? No. Make it. You divide everything by 3 first.
Do you have to do that to both sides then? Okay.
If you do it to one side, you got to do it to the other. Now, realistically, Savannah, it would just equal 0, so I wouldn't necessarily have to show it, but I did for training purposes. Okay? So now that A is 1, great job. What's the second thing I have to do?
Rid of the
Add 5. So I have x squared plus 4x equals 5. Why did I say equals 5? 0 plus 5 is 5. Good. I added 5. So proud of you guys. Oh, what is that?
It's just string.
Oh,
Came up with a bag.
that was hair. Okay. Now, what do I do to fill in that gap? What number is in the B position?
4.
What's 4 divided by 2?
2.
What's 2 squared? So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So now if I factor the left side, what times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 4? What adds up to be 4? So it's x plus 2. Now, again, I pointed this out on the first one. Usually I wait till like the second or third one so you guys can finally see it. But what number was this before I squared it? 2. What number is this right here? 2. Is that a coincidence that they're the same? No. They're always going to be the same. That number before I square it is equal to the number that goes inside there with that factoring. What's 5 plus 4 on the other side? 9 times. Okay? From here, what do I do? X plus 2 equals? Oh, shoot. This one doesn't have a square root left in there, so now I have to figure out the two different answers. So if I subtract 2 to both sides, what's 3 minus 2? 1. What's negative 3 minus 2? Negative 5. And there's my two answers for this one. This one had two separate ones because the square root went away. Okay? What do you guys think?
It's easy.
Awesome. Now, the only other thing that they're going to ask you to do is from 11 through 20, it's going to say find the value of c that makes it that way and express it as a square of a binomial. And here's what they mean by that direction. They're going to give you x squared plus 10x plus c. They want you to tell me what goes in that to make that a perfect square. There's no equal sign here. They just want you to work with what's going on the left side of the completing the square. So, what number is in the B position? What's 10 divided by 2? 5. What's 5 squared? 25. So you just found what was in the C. Okay? So 25 was C. Then they want you to factor that. What times what gives me x squared? What times what gives me 25? But adds up to be 10. X plus 5 squared. On 11 through 20, what they're asking you to do is it's getting you to work with what's happening on the left side of the equation. Not the whole thing, just the left side. Okay? So again, on page 116, if you want to look at that with me, 3 through 10 says solve the equation by using square roots. And that's what we did at the beginning two questions where we factored, and then we square rooted, and then solved. 11 through 20 is identical to this. 21 to 24 says find the value of c. It's doing the same thing. It's just written in a block format rather than this format. Here's what the block format would look like for this problem. If you had the 4 squares like this, x squared would be here, 5x would be here, 5x would be here. What goes here? That's what they're asking you to do for that. Do you have to draw the blocks? No. If you want to, sure. Okay? You just have to tell me what's missing. Then 25 to 36 says solve by completing the square. And that's what we were doing the whole problem all the way out. Is A1, move the constant, B over 2A, blah, blah, and go. What do you guys think? So on page 116, 3 to 36, multiples of 3. So here you go, Ange.